The following is a special presentation of Tony Kurre Radio.
Welcome back to another Keefer and Kurre. He is Kip Keefer. I am Tony Kurre. I hate the word middle-aged because we're really not middle-aged. We're
prime time.
We're prime time. You know, we're doing this show right around the holidays. And by the way, you just did a fantastic Need to Know. Make sure you check it out on the TKR app. Download that TKR app like 100,000 folks have already done. You can listen to the show whatever you want. Of course, wherever it's available on podcast, we're available there too. Growing up, so Christmas is now a couple days away. The one thing that is very difficult is if you had to buy a gift for that one person that seemed like they had everything, or maybe you're just not paying attention and you just didn't know what to get them. And my go-to gift every single year growing up, whether I was 12 years old or whether I was 42 years old, was music. I always knew what Kip Keefer's favorite band was. I always knew what my sister's favorite band was. I always knew what my friend's musical taste was. And I couldn't go wrong buying, 1984 Van Halen for Christmas. I just made sure they didn't have it. It was good to go. It was $9.99. It was in my range. I was good to go. So imagine my shock and awe when I found out early this morning that the last two Sam Goodies are going to close in the United States.
Oh, no.
Sam Goody in, I think it's Melton, Oregon, and there's another one in Township, Ohio.
Wow. That's interesting in itself.
It really is, isn't it? And you could just imagine. Now, of course, the man who did this, Mr. Goody himself, actually sold his company back in 1978, but he actually came out with his first store in 1951. At one point, it got over 1,000 stores. There was a Sam Goody. Now, people are like, if you're listening, you're like, what the hell's a Sam Goody? Sam Goody was a music store.
Yes.
And if you really want to know what a music store was to people like Kip and I, go watch Fast Times at Ridgemont High. There's a great scene in that where all the kids are hanging out at Sam Goody. They're hanging outside smoking joints. They're sitting there dropping F-bombs. They're listening to Iron Maiden music. And that's where everyone used to hang out. You used to hang out at the music store. That's where you went. If everyone said, what are you doing this afternoon? We're going to the music store, me and the music. And you'd sit down there at the music store for 2 or 3 hours. And the beautiful thing is when you started getting your JCPenney's and your Swallens and your Sears who started buying albums and buying stuff like that, it was really difficult to find the really good stuff. If you were trying to find, I remember there was a song from this band called Girl School. And it was these 5 hot chicks who had this song on MTV, and I'll never forget it. And I thought, man, and it's the only song that they ever came out with. And I'm thinking to myself, okay, do I want to bite the bullet and spend $8.99 knowing I've only heard one song off this album? Because you know what happens then? If you buy the album for one song and it sucks, then
the rest is garbage.
Well, somehow it gets scratched. And then you got to take it back. You get your $8.99 back, and then you have to buy another album. They didn't give you your money back, but you could go back. So, sometimes I'd walk in with 3 or 4 scratch versions. Now, if there was a second song off the album that was really good, you knew it was going to be good to go, as long as there were 2 good songs on the album. But I just remember walking through that store, Sam Goody, Swallens, and buying the songs. I spun records as soon as I got out of high school. My dad bought me a couple of SP3 PVs. I had a couple Technique 1200 turntables, just big bad dog turntables. The ones you
nice.
Get. Yeah, I mean, it was killer. It was unbelievable. They had the real diamond needles on it. And, I would spin records, and I would actually buy 45s. I don't remember. I don't know if you remember the 45 section. There was a section where you had all the albums, and a thing would go from here all the way to the end of the gym wall. Mm-hmm. And then, of course, there would be a section of just 45s. And that's
the little square things with almost the paper package. And,
exactly. And that's where you could go ahead and actually buy one song at a time. And they were usually 79, 89, or 99 cents. The only thing that sucked about that was because you put it on there, and of course, you had to turn it over. There was always a B side, and the B side sometimes was better than the A side. But I can't believe that Sam Goody, the store as we know it, and I don't think there's a Charlemagne anymore. I don't even know if there's this big vinyl thing going on about 3 or 4 years ago, maybe 10 years ago. Everyone said vinyl's back. Don't get rid of your vinyl. It was like baseball cards. I'm like, okay, so I held on to my 5,000 vinyls, and now you can go to like Second and Charles and get like Escape from Journey, and they want $39 for it, and I'm like, that's ridiculous. I mean, it makes no sense to push the album or vinyl, whatever you want to call it.
Renaissance.
Exactly. Push that. Thank you. Push that Renaissance when it's going to cost you $39 because I'm not even putting a needle near an album if I'm dropping $40 on it.
Absolutely not.
But I'm not
going to take it out of the package.
I wanted to dig. I had a garage sale about 10 years ago, and some guy came in and said, "Can I look through your albums?" And I said, "Yes." And I had him look through my albums just so I knew what stuff was worth. And he picked out about 150 albums and he said, "I'll give you $150 for all 150. I said, "It's not for sale. Get out of here."
$1 an album?
$1 an album. But that way I knew those 150 albums were the ones that were worth some money. I had like first draws of Elvis Presley. Remember when we used to buy albums off TV?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, you used to buy the albums off of TV. So I want to get your thoughts on that. I know you're big time into Jackson Browne and some songwriter stuff. I want to hear about some of your best pops, some of your best skips. I remember spinning records. You still do a lot of radio, but I remember we didn't have CDs. We had to spin records. You had to back it up a quarter turn and then hit the turntable because if the turntable volume was up, you could hear the turntable engage on the air. You could hear, you could hear go, go. You could hear that go.
Yeah.
So you had to keep it down. You had to hit it, then turn it up a quarter turn.
Oh, man.
And then, of course, just the sound of that skipping, that sound of that, you knew exactly where it was. And then we'll talk about even cereal box songs. People are like, cereal box songs. Oh, we can get all about cereal box songs, but I want to get your thoughts on albums and when do you listen to them? Do you still listen to them? Give me some sexy, beautiful, romantic stories about some of your favorite vinyl.
You're bringing back a lot of memories here. And once again, we talked about this last week. Keefer and Kurre started off, Tony and I strategizing what we're going to talk about. We have abandoned that now. And we've gone to, one of us comes up with an idea and throws it out and the other guy just has to react. And I think it makes for probably a better show with not thinking about it. In this case, I can just tell you the first album that I ever had, I remember I got two gifts. I think it was my 12th birthday that were monumental. I got my own stereo and it was, I had the turntable.
Do you remember what it was? What was it?
Gosh, I wish I could remember. I'm sure it was just a generic brand because, my folks didn't have a lot of money.
I had the old brown Kenwood. I had the brown Kenwood and the speakers, and I used to put the speakers right up to my ears. It was a Kenwood, and of course it had the knobs, where you could spin them, and they just spin. Yeah. Oh, I love that.
I got that, and that was really cool. And then later on, I don't even know how, because I wasn't really into the band, and my parents didn't really understand much about music. My parents, in fact, were in the opening stages right in my 12th birthday. And I could be wrong. Maybe it was my 11th, but they were divorced by the time I was in 8th grade, which in the 1970s, that was not a usual thing. No, so our family kind of dissolved. My mother did the best she could. But I remember the album I got, Tony, to this day. I don't remember what the album was called, but it was a Blood, Sweat, and Tears album. And I found so many songs on that album that I loved and still love to this day for a band that has kind of been forgotten by history. But, songs like "You Make Me So Very Happy." I mean, those are still songs that just resonate with me because that was my very first album. The one about, I'm not afraid of dying and I don't really care if it's peace you find in dying, then let the time be near. I know all of those songs by heart because that was my first album. And again, I don't know what motivated my mother to buy that album for me because I don't think I'd ever heard of the band before.
I'm sitting here, by the way. I'm sitting here. I got goosebumps the size of watermelons on my arm right now because I'm going through the discography. Child is Father to the Man, which of course was their first album. Blood, Sweat, and Tears was their second. Then of course they had Blood, Sweat, and Tears 3. Then BS and T4, New Blood, which was released back in 1972. And this is when bands used to come out with 2 or 3 things a year.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. It wasn't like once every 5 years kind of deal. And you know what was great about that band and so many bands in that era? There were so many different instruments used.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, it wasn't just guys grinding on a guitar. It was horns. It was strings. I mean, the music, you go back. I think I admitted to you a couple weeks ago, I'm in a pattern now where if I go out and sit in my chair in the backyard and fire up some kind of Pandora or iTunes, I'm listening to classic kind of 1960s stuff. I listen to grassroots radio, and those songs, and it's not just the lyrics, because it's all songs about the heartbreak of unrequited love and romance gone wrong and all the things that I still gravitate to. But it's the musical scores, Tony. You listen to classic Chicago. I mean, how many different horns and instruments and sounds are in that music? It's just something that I just value so much.
And the one thing that we did that unfortunately no one gets a chance to do right now is we used to listen to the whole album. You know, I mean,
sure.
the singles were normally like the first or second song on the A side or the B side. And you know, we may listen to it 3 or 4 times, but then we'd listen to the entire, and usually it was about 20 to 22 minutes aside. Each album was about 44. You could usually get an album on a 45-minute Memorex tape. I remember that much. And unless it was like some goofy Genesis album where they had one song that just went 4 minutes for no reason other than just you couldn't put it on a tape. It used to piss me off. I remember Abacab was like that. It ran like 48 minutes long and they didn't make 48-minute tapes. And I was like, damn it, I want to get that Abacab album on that 45-minute tape. I couldn't do it, so I had to chop a song off. But we used to listen to the entire album. And because of that, we fell in love. I can remember the first time I was sitting with a friend of mine. I was in Louisville, Kentucky, and I had just bought a stereo. I had a car. I had a 1984 Monte Carlo SS. It was my first car I ever bought. I remember I was $250 a month. I forget what my insurance was on it. My dad was paying my insurance, and I was paying for the car bill. And I got this stereo, and this friend of mine said, hey, man, you're going to go over to his house, and he's going to put the stereo in for you. And I said, great. So we drove over to his house, and it's like in an alleyway. There's cats scratching. I mean, it is not a good area of the neighborhood. I come in. He's got these 2 speakers up, and we must have listened to Souvenirs from Dan Fogelberg.
Oh,
we must have listened to that album, I don't know, 16 or 17 times.
You read my mind. When you said track the whole album, the first thing I thought was Dan Fogelberg.
Oh, man, we sat there and got high as crap. I know we wired it all wrong. The stereo was all messed up. We didn't care, but we sat there. I got there at 8 o'clock in the morning. It was 8 o'clock at night. We still weren't done, but we listened to Souvenirs from Dan Fogelberg. And had I not been in that situation, I would have never heard that album. It's one of the greatest albums of all time. I love it.
It's unbelievable. And, you know, Dan Fogelberg's known for Auld Lang Syne and The Power of Love and some other songs, maybe Part of the Plan a little bit.
Run for the Roses.
Yeah. Run for the Roses. Great call. Yeah. That's for sure. You know, and we lost him far too early to prostate cancer. I got to see him one of his last shows. I don't know if he's even diagnosed yet, at Chastain Park in Atlanta, which is an outdoor venue. And he played for 4 hours. Wow. Just unbelievable. Such a craftsman, such a musician. I don't know if anybody's ever picked a guitar better than Dan Fogelberg. He could make sounds that you'd never heard. But gosh, you talked about Souvenirs. There's so many great songs on that album.
You remember Part of the Plan? Part of the Plan, his first single, Part of the Plan.
Yeah.
Man. Yeah. Go ahead. Sorry, I didn't want to forget that song. Great song. Part of the Plan.
Part of the Plan is still one of my all-time favorites.
Oh, gosh.
But there's songs on Souvenirs, and the lyrics are so hauntingly beautiful that it just, you know, it just enthralls me. I just happened to come across a Facebook post from some kind of music club or something talking about Fogelberg the other day, and I found myself just writing whole, you know, stanzas of lyrics as a response of, you know, nice. Of some of the songs that people, and it's funny that the depths of people's love for certain artists, but they're not really into so much of their greatest works that are just undiscovered songs. They only are gravitate to the quote hits, and Fogelberg's got There's a song that Dan Fogelberg did called "The Reach," Tony, that is one of the most beautiful songs in the world. It's a tribute to people that have been in the lobster business in Maine their whole lives, how it's handed down to generations. And I mean, you Google "The Reach" and listen to that song and the musical accompaniment. I mean, it's just phenomenal. You talked about souvenirs. There's tons of songs on that album. He talks about.
He was one of the few guys, Kip. He was one of the few guys that I wanted to hear the songs that weren't the hits.
Yeah,
like when I bought like High Country Snow, man. I mean, and that was one of her. I say it was one of her newer, the Language of Love. Man, I wanted to hear the songs that weren't hits because I knew those are the ones that probably meant the most to him. I knew that he had to write a couple of hits, obviously for the label. But man, some of the songs that were just so fantastic. I want to go listen to him.
Tony, the song "Souvenirs" wasn't even a hit.
I know.
And the song "Souvenirs" is amazing. There's a passage in that is, and down in the canyon, the smoke starts to rise. It rides on the winds till it reaches your eyes. When faced with the past, the strongest man cries. He cries. I mean, the song, the lyrics are so hauntingly beautiful that, I mean, these are the songs that define my whole life.
Well, and it's unfortunate because now we can't give the gift of music anymore. I don't even know.
No.
Like no one ever says, someone, I think it was called Long After Dark. It may have been a Tom Petty album. I was working at Kentucky Fried Chicken. I was like 15 or 16. I remember hearing the song. And the song "You Got Lucky" was on that album. And I was listening to that song. And a good friend of mine was like, I wanted to buy you something for Christmas. And he bought me that album. And I remember the first album that I actually got my hands on. And it was relatively new, really, depending on how well it was. But we used to sell these candy bars in high school to raise money for our uniforms. And if you sold like a certain number of candy bars, you got to get these prizes. And one of these prizes was an album. And I ended up getting 38 Specials, Wild Eyed Southern Boys. Only not because of the music, but because of the hot chick with the satin, the pink hot satin pants she had on, the boots. And but I can remember getting that album. I thought, oh my gosh, this is fantastic. And then, I think I've told the story a couple of times where my brother actually gave me a Diary of a Madman from Ozzy Osbourne when I think I was like 16 or 17. And my dad's like, get that crap out of this house. Get that shit out of here. That stuff's not being played on Kenwood. Get it out of here. And my brother was like, it's got Flying High Again. It's got some great songs. Like, I don't give a damn. He's like, if you want your son to be cool, he's got to listen to some Ozzy Osbourne in high school. He's got to get away from this Dan Fogelberg stuff. But no, but I mean, I always remember thinking to myself, we were doing a show earlier this morning on K4 Wins, and I always thought to myself, okay, if I was missing a piece, or okay, this person's got 5 things to open, they need one more thing. I always went to the music store. I always went to Sam Goody, and I always picked up an album. I always got an album of one of their favorites because I already knew what kind of music they liked, or I got a cassette or I got a CD. And in this particular case, no one even knows this stuff anymore. I mean, these artists who, by the way, I think they're about ready to go up to Senator Congress or something. They're boohooing on the old AI thing because people are starting to create their own music, and they're using these people's. They're like, yes, I want a song that sounds like Dan Fogelberg, but has the lyrics of Jackson Browne and blah blah blah, and it just writes a song for you. And in some cases, it's a damn hit. I mean, it's amazing. And some of these artists are like, well, we don't like that. Yeah, I just remember that, and again, still I got that crate of albums, several of them, actually 10 of them, to be honest with you, sitting down in the basement, and I've made a coffee table out of them. I used to have I had a friend of mine that started framing all of his favorite albums and just hung them on his wall, and I was like, okay, that's cool. I really don't even know it. It's one of those things where I can't let go of it. I cannot let go of it. I don't know what to do with it, and I don't know what my kids are going to do with it when I die. And that's the thing that sucks. But God rest Sam Goody, man, because I mean, it's one of the
unbelievable. That's a stunning. I'm not surprised that it's come to an end. I am shocked at the 2 locations that are left. I would never have guessed Oregon and Ohio, but that's pretty remarkable stuff. But it's just the end of an era. And you said something really profound a minute ago. If you want to give somebody the gift of music, how do you do it? I mean, you send them like some kind
iTunes
of
gift card. iTunes gift card. That's my son. Yeah. But I mean, it's just not.
But that's so impersonal. Gift. That's another. I mean, this is not the subject, but I know gift cards are the easiest thing to give, and the justification is, well, I don't have to put any thought into it. They can get what they want with the gift card I send them. I think that's a sad direction. Yeah. The thing that I love about Christmas, and it's really hard for me to do, but I still do it. I want to go shop and make decisions based on what I have a general idea, but when I go shop, I want the satisfaction and my own gratification of picking out something specifically for somebody and not just giving them some, here you go, here's a couple $100 gift card, go knock yourself out. Yeah. That to me is just kind of cheapens the whole thing.
No, I agree with you. I really do. And I don't know what it means. I don't know what it says about us. I've talked to my son about, and he's got his playlist, and every song on his playlist, he's got like 300 songs on his playlist, and he knows every single song on his playlist. He could probably tell you what they're ordering. And I'm like, doesn't it ever bother you that you don't get a chance to listen to a different song from Nelly or Flava Flav or whoever the hell he's listening to? Doesn't it bother you that you don't hear any of these offcuts? He's like, no, because I probably wouldn't like those songs. I like these songs and I got on my favorites. And I said, I realize that. And he goes, man, it must have sucked for you, because you had to listen to 6 songs on each side of an album just to listen to. And I mean, I was a music director at a radio station. That was my job. And when the new vinyl, when the new vinyl came in, I had to listen to each side and then put a star by the songs I thought were going to be stars. Or if there was cussing in it, there was an F-bomb, I had to put a little check mark on it so we make sure we didn't play that through FCC regulations. But I'm like, you guys are missing out on so much. It's just, because there were so many songs, you'd ask somebody like a Michael Jackson who could write a hit anytime he wanted to. But he will tell you there were a lot of songs that he wrote that he knew weren't hits, but were important to him. Mm-hmm. And much like Dan Fogelberg or Jackson Browne or anyone else, that was the art part of it. That was the art part of it. That's where they wrote the lyrics. They wrote the song. Sometimes it was something where they have to put it away and bring it back out, and they do it 3 or 4 times. Sometimes it was something they wrote, maybe after they had a scotch or water after a show at Riverbend Music Center, and they could write it in 3 or 4 minutes. But those were the songs. I mean, I just think of like Billy Joel. Oh my gosh. I mean, think about how many songs that weren't hits for him that are hits now, because so many people follow him and watch him, and they go to hear the Piano Man, but they don't hear the rest of the music he does.
And I got to give you credit, Tony. It's thanks to guys like you who did the work, who listened to all the cuts, because guys like you would say, hey, I discovered a great song on this new album. And so many songs that became bigger hits probably never would have been discovered if people like you did not to do the hard work of getting them out. But you mentioned Joel. He's got so many songs that I just absolutely love that were just not big hits. They weren't radio hits. And I think of, and the other thing that defined a lot of that, if the song was perceived as too long, it never got in the public vernacular. Yeah. One of my very favorite Billy Joel songs is Scenes from an Italian Restaurant. It's about 7 minutes long, but I could listen to that every minute of every day if I had.
And there are so many people that are Billy Joel fans that never knew that song until 10, 15 years ago. And now they know it because he goes in concert plays. And I'll let you go on this. I went and saw Bruce Springsteen. Not a big Bruce Springsteen fan. I'm just not one of these guys that I wouldn't follow him around. I knew A Hungry Heart. I knew Born in the U.S. I knew his big songs, 10th Avenue Freeze Out, Rosalita. And I knew all those songs because I played them on the radio.
And Born to Run is an all-time classic.
It is. It's unbelievable. And I remember seeing him. He was at the BJCC. This was probably 20 years ago. And I went there and I'm sitting there waiting to hear the hits. And, that was when we had the internet, but you couldn't get on the internet and find out what the playlist was. You had to actually. So I wrote down the songs, and he played for 3 hours, and I knew 3 songs. I've been playing Bruce Springsteen on the radio since I was 12 years old. He played 3 songs I knew in a 3-hour concert, and it was still one of the best concerts I've ever seen. I was like, now I get it. Now, because he played every song like it was the last time he's ever going to play that song. I didn't know any of the stuff he played from the river, from everything else. And I mean, I absolutely loved it. And I thought, man, these poor kids who are getting these songs now, they don't even get these great songs that aren't meant to be heard in mass. It really isn't.
Well, I'll finish with this thought. You're talking about Springsteen. He had a really obscure, doesn't even sound like a Springsteen song, but the only reason anybody ever discovered it, the reason I discovered it, is because I'm a huge Cameron Crowe fan who's had 4 or 5 mega hits in Hollywood, including one of the great movies of all time, Jerry Maguire, which is one of my favorite movies ever. Tom Cruise was just fantastic as the sports agent, all of the Renee Zellweger, everybody in that movie. But Cameron Crowe obviously had discovered a Springsteen song that's played in there. That's still one of my all-time favorites, Secret Garden. And it's just a beautiful song with strings and all kinds of music. And it's when they're having their problems because he marries her and he's just not quite I don't need to tell the story, but Secret Garden is a real obscure Bruce Springsteen song. And I'm telling you, it's one of my all-time favorites, and I never would have discovered it had I not been paying attention to other forms of art. And I think, if you really look back on people and you mentioned the art is important, because people that were painters and composers and sculptors in their lifetime, largely a lot of them were completely undiscovered. It was after they were long gone where a lot of these people, get the real notoriety that they deserve. And I think a lot of musicians are that way. And I'm kind of concerned going forward that a lot of that's going to be lost now, because music has taken such a radically different direction. We've gotten away from lyrics. We've gotten away from instruments. It's all this what's even the term? All of this computer generated thumpity thump stuff. It's got to be bass. Did I hear a couple years ago that they say there's only like 3 basic programs that are the foundation of every song that's recorded now?
Probably, yeah. And the Beatles created those.
Pretty much. George Martin, who we talked about before. So anyway, it's kind of a lament of mine. I don't know going forward if we have the same kind of hand-me-down situation where a lot of these people, even after they're gone, are largely discovered. And I think that's a sad trend. Now,
Sam Goody, rest in peace. You'll be missed.
Unbelievable.
It makes me want to open a vinyl store, but then again, I also want to be able to put food on the table and people
I don't think that's a booming industry.
I don't think it is either.
As much as I'd love to have some records, I don't have a record player anymore. I'm guilty of technology because when I had achieved my ultimate goal of putting in my own home theater, which my son facilitated and hooked up and did a masterful job. He said, look, don't cheat yourself by going cheap on a sound system. Get the best sound system possible, because that will make the experience. I watched Die Hard this weekend, the ultimate Christmas movie, and I really cranked my system up. I've never really heard the sound in Die Hard until this weekend. And a lot of the time, I don't even turn the television on. I just go to music services and just crank my songs my sound system now, and it's heavenly, Tony.
That's fantastic. Speaking of heavenly, another great show coming up Saturday morning, 10:30, 11 o'clock. Bowl season is well underway. We're going to be on ABC 3340. Kip Keefer and Tony Kurre. It's called The Starting Lineup, along with our cast of idiots. We'll be out there getting it done. You're going to be in Las Vegas.
Yeah, I'll be in Vegas with my son, Case.
You'll be at Point Zero.
I haven't been on camera with him in a couple of years, so I'm really looking forward to that.
Enjoy your trip, and I'll hold down the fort here in town and get it done and continue to listen to Need to Know. And, of course, Keefer and Kurre right here on Tony Kurre Radio. God bless, and Merry Christmas, my friend.
Tony, right back at you. Great theme. You never disappoint.
This has been a special presentation of Tony Kurre Radio.